We always hear that progress is all about a growing economy. But what if that growth leaves millions and millions of people behind? Today, we're digging into that deep, complicated connection between global justice and development. Is it even possible to build a world that isn't just richer, but is actually fairer for every single person in it? Let's get into it. Okay, to really get to the heart of this, we're going to frame our whole conversation around one single question. And trust me, it's a question that has kept thinkers and leaders up at night for decades. And as you're about to see, the answers are anything but simple. So here it is, the big one. Can we actually build a world that is both truly just and fully developed for everyone who lives here? And you can bet the answers are all over the place, from, cautious optimism to some pretty deep skepticism. But before we get into all those different perspectives, let's just make sure we're on the same page with what these big words even mean. So first up, what exactly do we mean by global justice? Well, this idea really pushes us to think beyond our own backyard. It's not just about what's fair inside one country. It's the belief that principles like equality and human rights apply to everybody, everywhere on the planet. It means we have this kind of shared ethical responsibility to each other. And then we've got global development. For the longest time, people just measured this with economic numbers like GDP, but that's a pretty incomplete picture, right? Today, we understand development as something much bigger. It's about improving human well-being across the board, where social progress and good, solid governance are just as important as the economic numbers. And this powerful line right here from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this is really the moral bedrock for this whole conversation. I mean, if we truly believe this, that everyone is born with equal dignity and rights, then making sure they have a real shot at a good life isn't just some policy goal. It becomes a moral imperative. And that brings us to the absolute core idea of this whole explainer. You just can't have one without the other. Justice and development are completely intertwined. You can't build lasting progress on a foundation of injustice, and it's pretty hard to have justice when people don't even have the basics they need to live. They're absolutely two sides of the same coin. So, okay, if we agree that they're linked, how in the world do we actually do it? Well, a lot of brilliant minds have come up with different strategies. Let's look at 4 of the most influential ideas as sort of competing blueprints for how to build a better world. Let's kick things off with 2 heavyweights in philosophy, John Rawls and Amartya Sen. And right away, they show us this huge disagreement about where you even begin. For Rawls, it's all about the system. You have to build fair rules and institutions first. But for Sen, it's the other way around. He says, no, you have to start with people by empowering them with real freedoms. So let's dig into Rawls's idea a little more. He boils it down to 2 main principles. First off, everyone gets the same fundamental rights, period, no exceptions. And second, and this is the part that's really radical, any inequality is only okay if that system ends up helping the people at the very bottom the most. It's a really powerful way to think about structuring a society. Okay, so what about Sen's take on this? For him, a country isn't developed just because it has a lot of money. No way. Real development is about expanding what people are actually able to do and to be. It's about giving them the real freedom and the tools, like education, like healthcare, to choose a life that they themselves have reason to value. It's a profoundly human-centered approach. Now, our third blueprint, well, it kind of throws a wrench in the whole thing. Dependency theory looks at the world and says, wait a minute. It challenges the whole idea that poorer countries are just behind. Instead, it argues that the global economic system was designed, historically, to keep poor nations dependent on richer ones, creating this vicious cycle that's incredibly hard to break. So how does this work? Well, the key idea is this core-periphery dynamic. You've got the periphery countries who provide cheap labor and raw materials. All that wealth then flows to the core countries, who turn it all into high-profit, finished goods. The whole structure, the theory says, is basically set up to keep that unequal flow of money and power going. Okay, so we've looked at blueprints that focus on institutions, on individuals, and on the global structure. But they can sometimes feel like separate pieces of a giant puzzle. And that brings us to our final blueprint, one that really tries to bring all of these concerns together into a single vision for the future. And that's where sustainable development comes in. The key word here is balance. This framework says that just chasing economic growth at all costs is, frankly, a dead end.
For development to be real and to last, it has to be built on three equal pillars. You need economic growth, sure, but you also need social inclusion to make sure everyone benefits, and environmental protection, so we have a planet left to live on.
All right, so we have four really powerful ideas on the table. But, theories are one thing. Reality is something else entirely. How do these blueprints actually hold up when they collide with the messy, complex real world? Let's put them to the test.
This is where it gets so fascinating, right? Look at Sweden, a classic Rawlsian model. Its strong welfare state creates this huge safety net for the least well-off. Then you have Brazil, with its famous Bolsa Familia program, a perfect example of Sen's ideas. It gave families cash, but only if they kept their kids in school and got them healthcare, directly investing in their capabilities. And then there's post-genocide Rwanda, which focused on community-based restorative justice to literally rebuild the social fabric as the first step toward development. But the takeaway is crystal clear. No single model is perfect. Each one has had incredible successes, but they all face their own massive, ongoing challenges.
So what can we take away from these real-world experiments? A few pretty tough truths, really. First, there is no magic bullet. No single blueprint just works everywhere. The local context, especially a country's history, is everything. Second, none of this ever happens without incredible political will. And finally, even when you make real progress, man, it is often so fragile and can be reversed in a heartbeat.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, it tells us that the search for global justice and development, it's not a race with a finish line. It's much better to think of it as this enormous, ongoing, unfinished project for all of us. All right, so let's circle all the way back to where we started. After looking at all these big ideas and seeing how tough it is to make them work on the ground, can we really say that a just and developed world is achievable? What's the verdict?
This famous definition of sustainable development is so critical because it brings in another dimension we haven't talked about yet: time. This isn't just about us right now. It's about intergenerational justice, our deep responsibility to the people who are going to inherit this planet from us. It forces us to think long-term.
So here is the bottom line. While the path forward is ridiculously complex and full of setbacks, the fundamental link is absolutely clear. You cannot build lasting development on a foundation of injustice. Economic growth that leaves people out or wrecks the environment, that's not development. That's just exploitation. Real, true progress demands both, working together always. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. These big global theories are so important, but the real work, it often starts small, right? So if there's no one-size-fits-all solution for the planet, then maybe the most important question isn't about the whole world. Maybe it's about the community right outside your front door. What does that first step look like there? Thanks for tuning in.